Hey guys, welcome back to Trendy Gadget. Today we'll talk about why the new M1 iMacs are mind-blowing. Let's head into it. The M1 Macs. Apple released 3 computers with the same CPU, GPU, RAM combo when the M1 System on a Chip (SoC) was introduced. The M1 MacBook Air, M1 MacBook Pro, and the M1 Mac Mini. It may appear that 3 options are redundant, but I can confidently say the Mac Mini is the best choice for the vast majority of photographers. I'll have to turn to economics to explain why. There's a principle in economics called the law of diminishing returns. In simple terms, the law states that there is an optimal balance between input and output, after which increasing input leads to smaller and smaller gains in output. In terms of photography, at first, spending more money or input on nicer gear can have a huge impact on image quality or output, but after a certain point, the benefit per dollar spent keeps getting smaller and smaller as you spend more and more. Eventually, you spend thousands that week on a 5 to 10% sharpness improvement or low light performance or whatever vanity metric is popular. Why the Mac Mini is so great. This principle is at the heart of my Mac Mini opinion. The Mac Mini sits closest to that optimal balance of input and output of the 3 Apple Silicon Macs currently on the market, giving you the most benefit for the least investment. As usual, so to speak, the unit we have been sent for review is maxed out. It's certainly not cheap, at $1,700, and yet, despite being the most expensive M1 Mac Mini you can buy, it's still $600 cheaper than the M1 MacBook Pro equivalent. If I were to customize my own Mac Mini for photo editing, I would probably skimp on Apple's SSD upgrades, and instead buy the 1TB for $1,300 or 512GB for $1,100 version. I wouldn't recommend skimping on RAM, particularly as there is no way to upgrade it later. Design. We won't devote much time to design or construction quality. That's about all you can say about it. It's a well-made aluminum box, small and unobtrusive. I've always admired the Mac Mini for how easily it can be tucked away in a corner of a desk and pass for a fancy paperweight. In terms of ports, there are 2 USB-A ports on the M1 Mac Mini, 2 USB 4 ports, mainly Thunderbolt 4, an HDMI 2.0 port, a gigabit Ethernet port, and a 3.5mm headphone jack. You can always run 2 displays at the same time using the USB 4 ports and the HDMI 2.0 port, 6K 10-bit at up to 60Hz through the USB 4 port, and 4K 10-bit up to 30Hz through the HDMI. That's how, without using 2 computers, I was able to compare the blooming efficiency of the Dell UP3221Q and the Pro Display XDR side by side. They were both powered by the same M1 Mac Mini. Finally, a lot of people pointed out that instead of 4, the M1 Mac Mini and the M1 MacBook Pro only featured 2 Thunderbolt ports.
It only has 2 Thunderbolt ports and woof, touch bar, although it does have slightly better battery life.
The fact that you're getting the same number of Thunderbolt buses is something that most people don't mention, and thankfully some do. There is 1 TB bus for every port on the M1 Macs. In real-world terms, this means that instead of sharing it with another port, each port gets a full 40GB per second bandwidth for itself. Performance. When I first got the Mac Mini, the main thing I wanted to test was performance, specifically efficiency relative to the M1 MacBook Pro that we have already reviewed. Both of these computers have the same, everything the same, CPU, the same GPU, and the same amount of onboard RAM.
The laptop looks nearly identical to the MacBook Air, exactly the same. Same aluminum outer shell, same scissor keyboard, and same display.
But battery life must be taken into account by the MacBook Pro, so the Apple Silicon M1 can simply not run or cool as efficiently. That is at least the theory. Does this pan out in performance terms? The brief answer is yes. On the fully loaded M1 Mac Mini, M1 MacBook Pro, and 13-inch Intel MacBook Pro, we ran our standard set of Lightroom Classic and Photoshop benchmarks, as well as a Blackmagic disk speed test. In every category, the Mac Mini outperforms, not always by a lot, but there are always better times or scores. Remember that the Lightroom Classic and Photoshop benchmarks were run on Intel optimized versions of these apps via Rosetta 2, but the emulated performance is already nearly as good, if not better, than the Intel Mac.
That means that these Macs pick up the things that Apple is good at on those computers. They're very fast, yet manage to have great battery life.
The one significant weakness of all M1 Macs is the performance of the GPU, but GPU performance is not a huge deal for photo editing, as we've said before, and we'll probably have to say it again. Video editing benefits significantly, and a few tasks in both Photoshop and Lightroom are GPU accelerated, but the majority of tasks in the typical photography workflow are unaffected. What do you think about the new M1 iMacs? Do you agree that they are mind-blowing? Let us know in the comment section. This brings us to the end of our video. I hope you enjoyed it, hit like if you did, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss any of our videos in the future. Also, watch the 2 videos that are on your screen because I'm sure you'll love them. With that, I'll see you in the next video.